these things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. That, of course, is John 16:33. Welcome back to another episode of Thinking Well Podcast. I'm Kyle, and your guest today of the Meet the Members is Nick Dykan. How are you, sir?
I am well.
You are my guest and my co-host today.
I know. 2 in 1.
2 in 1. But we advertise this a bit throughout the week. This is the next installment in the Meet the Members testimonies / life stories series that we got going on. So I won't spend too much time talking about it, but let's just dive in, Nick. Tell me your life story, man. Tell me your testimony.
Here we go.
Let's dive in, dude. Buckle up.
Been teasing it for 10 episodes now. Yeah. I realized. Well, it's a long one, so if you can't finish it in one sitting, good thing you can pause it. But unfortunately for you, Kyle.
I don't have that luxury. I have to sit here and endure it. Yeah. But
no. I do. Before we start, I just kind of want to prologue it with, just this verse that we opened up with. John 16:33 is my life verse.
It's a good one.
It has been a reminder for me, that just whatever goes on in life, no matter how difficult it is, it reminds me of who I am in Christ, and it reminds me of who Christ is. And then no matter how hard the world gets, no matter the pressure that gets put on you, Jesus is greater. And because he's greater than all of it, as a child of God, I am able to overcome it as well. But only through him, right? But that verse has been such a blessing to me, and it's one that I hold to. I don't think I'll ever change it. It's just such a good reminder for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we'll bring people on, and I usually ask them, about a life verse. We try to get some kind of indication on what we should read to begin with, or if they have something selected, or if there's something that's like topical that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I always love kind of hearing, each individual's kind of life verse and like the story. Like, there's a story behind it always.
Yeah. As there should be, when you have a life verse. But I'll stop stalling and we'll just dive in. I'll start at the very beginning. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, 1999, making some of you feel old. Parents lived there for a few weeks after I was born, so I'm more of a Texan than I am from Tennessee. We moved after 2 weeks of being born to Fort Worth, Texas, to move in with my grandmother in Benbrook, and then my parents moved to Fort Worth, North Fort Worth, Keller-ish area, if you're around here. And then in that house that we moved into, we were there for a few years, and my brother Ben was born in 2002. And that's when it all starts going downhill. Just right there. Just kidding. Love you, Ben.
Got him.
Just playing. I have very few memories in that house. But most of them is just, as a toddler is, I guess. 2004-ish, 2003, 2004, moved to Saginaw, Texas, off of Old Decatur Road. It was a new development, and of course I have so many memories in that house because we lived there for most of my childhood. And I have a lot of great memories in my childhood. I don't come from a Christian household per se. My mom is testified that she was saved at a younger age. But she grew up in a Methodist home, and she was saved at a Baptist camp, but never had that continual influence as most Christians need to have after they're saved. So it just became carnal. And then my dad grew up Catholic, and just never really fully believed. So Christianity was not really present in my home. There were glimpses of it. Like I grew up knowing who Jesus was. I knew the small stories like Noah's Ark. It's like I would say is strangely the most popular baby story for
Yeah, I would agree.
for children. But like I had like toys and stuff like that for like Noah's Ark, and then I grew up watching VeggieTales. I did have some influence from my grandmother. I called her my Mima. She was Catholic, and she tried to get me and Ben to do certain prayers and whatnot. But as stubborn and ADHD filled as we were, didn't pay it much mind. But I would say that the first like real influence I had came from a family that babysat me. Growing up, Ben and I had a lot of babysitters. Mom and Dad both worked. Tons and tons of babysitters, but there was one family that we really stuck with for a long time. I guess if I think about it, maybe 5 years or so. Sorry, you're going to be hearing me drink water probably throughout this whole thing. But the Sherman family babysat me and Ben for about 5 years, and I would say that was my first real Christian influence that I had from, again, VeggieTales or praying before we eat, teaching, instilling those values. It really came from there, and I don't remember too much, but I do remember that I loved VBS. I don't know what kind of church they went to. And I don't remember what was being taught at VBS, but I remember loving it every single year that we would do it, or that they would do it, that they would take us to it. And so I haven't spoken to them in years, but I am friends with them on Facebook, and I may send them this episode, but super thankful for them, helping raise Ben and I, and just instilling those values. I mean, Ben and I weren't saved yet at that time, but seeds were definitely planted in that home. And so I'm very grateful for them. And, but overall, like my early childhood, I would say was great. I think there can be this misconception among Christians that, life outside of Christ is just automatically terrible. And I wouldn't necessarily side with that. I do think it's possible to have a humanly speaking good life without Christ. But as the Bible says, that's like building your house upon sand. You can still do it, but when the storms come and it begins to flood, the chances of the house staying up very, very slim.
Right, and there's no eternal value.
Right, exactly. And so, I have great parents, loving parents, blessed with both of them. A lot of, the younger elements of my character that I have now, that I carry with me now, really come from both my parents, that are instilled from secular mindsets that just happen to have, biblical morals. So yeah, my early years, I was just truly blessed. And then come 4th grade, Miss May's class.
Bro, I had Miss May as well.
Miss May's class.
Miss May. I wonder what she's doing, bro.
I don't know.
You can look her up.
Miss May's class, 4th grade. I think this is, if I'm being completely honest, this is probably the grade that I really started having like actual friends, like people I would call best friends at that time.
Sure.
And it would just so happen to be a young man by the name of Bryce Reeves.
Hey, I know him.
Bryce and I had the same 4th grade class. And funny enough, we didn't start out as friends. We always fought. And it's going to sound silly, but we fought over a girl primarily, of course.
As one does.
As young boys do. As men do at times.
10-year-olds do in the 4th grade.
But at some point in that grade, in 4th grade, we went from enemies to friends. And I think that what really helped kindle that more was, we lived in a suburb, and, suburbs like D.R. Horton homes, like stuff like that. The mailboxes aren't always like in the front yard. Sometimes they're collective, like a community mailbox, and we had that in our neighborhood. And I remember, I guess about 10 years old. It was just down the street. Mom and Dad told me to go get the mail, and I did. I walked down the street, and I hear a couple skateboards and a bike zooming past me, and it was Bryce, you, and Cameron. And of course, the only person I knew was Bryce, and we had become good friends at that point. So when I saw him, I was like, how am I seeing you right now? Like, where do you live? So I ended up following you guys, I guess, and seeing that you guys lived literally right around the corner from where I lived. And I find that funny because from the sounds of like your dad's testimony and like how knowing when we moved in, like we were there for, both our families were there for a minute without seeing each other. And so, of course, seeing my best friend from school live right around the corner, it's like best day ever, dude. So, of course, go get the mail like I'm told, come right back out, see what you guys are doing. Of course, that you guys, I lived on Kentucky Derby, you guys lived on Western Star, and like all the kids ever were on Western Star.
Yeah, I had a lot of kids, and it had like a cul-de-sac at the end, so it wasn't like a super busy thoroughfare like Kentucky Derby was.
Yeah,
it wasn't as busy. You had to kind of have a reason to go down that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, now at one point, everybody on that street had kids, and I mean, I don't know if it's not that way to right today in 2026, but no. I mean, in 2006, 2007, yeah, man, we were still outside, and we would go outside definitely during the summer and just ride bikes and explore. And
yeah, dude, it wasn't even just the kids. Like there'd be parents out there too. Like your dad was always out there playing football with everybody, and it is kind of sad because it's on the way home from me when I drive home from church. So every now and again I'll drive.
Dude, I drove through it for the first time in like 15 years or 10, like a decade, like this last week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool because like when we lived there, it was a newer development.
Mm-hmm.
So all the planted trees and things are all pretty small, but like you drive through there now and it looks like an established, like older neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dude, this isn't
super weird.
It doesn't look half bad. I mean, like it's still a little bit older.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I drove past your house. I drove past our house, and I was like, man, like everything looks smaller. It's weird.
It does. Well,
yeah.
It's because all those stupid cars.
Yeah, dude.
In the road. Anyhow, if you didn't live there, everyone and their mother and their dead grandmother parks in the road for some reason. Not the driveway, the road.
And they're small streets, man.
Super narrow streets.
Yeah, two cars can't pass at one time, so you have a lot of like one person pulling over, making room and taking turns to drive down a road. Yeah, it was always that way.
Yeah. But no, I mean, and that kind of goes more into my early childhood memories of just, always playing outside and, whether it would be football or anything else that we were doing. And, you were a little bit older than us. So you hung out with us, but not as much. And that's what kind of started whenever, I found out that you guys lived so close. Of course, this was a time when everybody had sleepovers. Sadly, it's a little different time now, but always going over to your house. I remember the first time I ever went to your house was for Bryce's birthday party, and me with no manners, I go into your parents' pantry to find food, and I grabbed something like a bag of chips, a small bag of chips or something. And your mom, she walked by, she's like, "Where did you get that?" I was like, "The pantry." And she was so mad, dude. And I never stopped. Every time I went over, it was just raiding their pantry, and they became a little bit more okay with it, I guess, or at least they stopped saying something to me. And I feel kind of bad now because, your dad's said that they were having like money struggles at that point in time. And just this kid coming over all the time, raiding their food, little fat kid just coming over stealing your food. But no, I mean, always over at your house. And of course, you guys were coming to church a lot. And so I was very aware that you guys went to church. 5th grade or so, I think, was the first time I ever came to Lake Worth. I went to one Kid Venture class back in our old children's building, which is an abandoned part of our church right now, or just storage, I guess.
It has a purpose.
It has use, but yeah, it's a faint memory. I remember going in, coloring something, and being like, I don't understand what the big deal is about this, but okay. And I thought I'd get a vest because Cam and Bryce had cool little vests on, and I didn't get one, so I was a little bitter about that. But yeah, nothing to. This is just kind of setting up my life then. So whoever's listening, and you're like, "Where's this going?" It's just setting up the backdrop of my life. That's how I was, and just had a very loving family, great parents, and best friend and his family lived right around the corner, and just a lot of good stuff. And middle school, going into my middle school years, Bryce moved up to youth group and started inviting me to church more. And I'd go. And this is I guess CJ said that his time period was Jeff Whitehead as the youth pastor. And then you said it was Zach.
It was Gabe and Zach.
And Zach. And my era was Zach and your dad.
Yeah, immediately after mine.
Yeah, and Zach wasn't in there for very long because you were only in there for a little while too.
When I came in. Yeah.
Which completely different time period than it is now. As a youth teacher, it's funny because I come up in this room and we're always doing projects in this room. Like right now we're remodeling some stuff. And just seeing how new it is now, how new it looks, and it just did not look that way when I came up.
Yeah, the amount of time that we spent in this area of the church is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Just the progress we've made, and now kind of the full circle that like you're teaching the youth, and I mean we're doing this up here. I mean this looks completely different 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, dude.
It just where we've come has been interesting. We were talking about that the other day.
But came up here, and I was always a quiet kid for the most part. Introvert has kind of always been my main label. My wife doesn't believe me, but it's true. At heart, I'm pretty quiet. I can get pretty shy around people. Even now is something I do wrestle with. I wrestle with it less. But in my middle school, adolescent years, especially about to be 13, right when all of the emotions are kicking in, all the insecurities are starting to come in at that age. I was a very quiet kid. And coming into a new place at this church, I didn't really know anybody aside from Bryce and Cam. And it's pretty quiet. Talked to some people, and I'll be honest, when I first came up into this youth department, I did not care for it. I did not. I hated the worship time. I hated singing in front of people, and I didn't know any of the songs, and you had to stand, and my lazy butt can stand for 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, however long we did it. And then I hardly ever listened to what Zach or your dad was teaching. I was that guy, that kid. And I'll tell you the one time that I did enjoy coming up here was the first ever game night that I experienced. Of course, right? And it was Daniel Kaufman and Allison up here. I guess Zach and your dad just weren't there that Wednesday night, and they were running it, and I was like, man, this guy running youth group, this is how it should be run.
Playing all the games.
Yeah, this guy knows what's up. And then I was like super bummed the next Wednesday to come if we weren't doing game night. But I kept coming because Bryce, would invite me, and it got to a point to where like even your parents were asking if I wanted to go, just because we were outside at that time after school. And started coming more and started making friends slowly. And when I say slowly, I mean slow, because I was in the youth group at the same time as Gracie, and we still even joke about it today. But for a straight year, she thought my name was Michael. I don't know where she got the name Michael from, and I don't think she remembers either, but for a solid year, she thought that was my name.
She just assigned you a name and just
She's
went
like,
with
that's
it.
your name. And then I remember when you come here for so often, you start to realize we go to camp every summer. And so summer came around, and your dad is promoting camp. And back then we used to do like games for camp, like before the church would do so many fundraisers to pay for camp. This was like, you get like Zach bucks or something. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that.
It was like they would do some like trivia thing, and whoever got this question right, like you get like a Zach buck, and it took some money away from your camp.
I see.
Tuition or whatnot. And I really wanted to go because it sounded fun. And of course, I want to go with my friends. And I asked my parents, this is 2011. I asked my parents if I can go, and camp is expensive. And it's still expensive. And my parents, again, weren't so familiar with it. And they were like, no, you're not going. And I wasn't extremely mad about it. I'm sure I threw probably like a fit one night and then was fine. But still kept going to church. Another whole year goes around, coming up here every Sunday, every Wednesday. And camp starts being talked about again, 2012. I really want to go this time. I've like made friends with everybody practically at this point. I was really wanting to go, and I think now, in 2012, I had Ben with me too, Ben up in youth group with me at that time also, and you now have two voices asking parents to go to camp, and so they allowed us to go to camp. I remember the theme, second to one. Blue t-shirts, super cool. Went there, got our phones taken up for the week, was not psyched about it, but I lived with it. And there is a part of me that does enjoy the fact that the kids still have to go through that today. I'm like, I had to go through it. Now you guys got to go through it. But went to camp for the first time, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the songs more because I knew them at this point. And of course, you go with all your friends and you start meeting more people from different churches. And growing up, because I had always had Jesus be a part of my life, I thought I was good to go. And I do have some memories of having conversations with like Cameron or Bryce about how like I said I was a Christian, and one of them saying like no, or both of them probably said no at some point, like you're not, because you're not saved. And I was like, well, I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus does exist. And even at that time, they're like, no, that's not how that works. Which the gospel is so simple, right? That even a child can understand it. And I kept convincing myself, even at that young age, that was enough. Believing in Christ, his existence was enough. But when we went to camp, we had that first night there. I remember sitting down in the front of the tabernacle, which is the sanctuary that we have worship in and services in, evening chapel there. I couldn't tell you what the message was about, but I do remember that there was some sort of illustration of like a younger individual who didn't live very long. And I just sat and thought about it and got the gospel message through that also. And I remember sitting and thinking about it, and we went back up to our cabin, and our cabin that year was ash. So for our fellow campers, you understand the long walk.
As far as it gets, bro.
Yep.
As far as it gets.
The border of camp, pretty much. Made that long walk and was just sitting there just thinking about it the whole time. Just couldn't get my mind off of it. And of course, at that time, I didn't really understand what was happening, but, you know, the Holy Spirit was convicting me right there. And I have heard, you know, from lessons up here about being saved, and that message was really striking with me. I remember I was laying on the top bunk in the cabin, just staring at the ceiling, just sitting there convincing myself that I was fine, that I'm good. And then there was just this loud part inside of me that was like, you're not. And then the next thing was, okay, I need to be saved. I don't know how, but I need to tell somebody. And that was another barrier because I'm an introvert. Walking up to people, not my forte. And so then I was trying to convince myself to go and tell somebody that I need to, or how do I do that? And, you know, I was having these thoughts in my mind of like, you're fine. Like, you're good. You don't need to go talk to anybody. You're fine. But that just wasn't enough for me. I'm like, I need to talk to somebody because it's starting to like mess me up a bit. So I get down from my bunk. I run over to your dad, person I'm most familiar with as the adult. And I tell him, I don't think I'm saved. And he led me outside of the cabin. He's like, well, let's go talk about it. And he opened up scripture, the Romans 10, 9 through 10, verse 13. Accept Christ in your heart. Confess with your mouth. And then he did the whole like Can you do enough to go to heaven? No. Who can? Jesus. And you know that he died for you? Yes. Can you have eternal life without him? No. Do you want to trust in Christ tonight? Yes. And then he was like, well, tell him. Tell him, not me. So I remember your dad started praying. And then after he prayed, he had me pray. And I trusted in Christ that night.
Amen.
Walked in, told everyone the good news. Everyone was celebrating. Next night, my brother has the same feeling. He goes up to Zach. A couple minutes later, Zach and Ben come back. Ben just accepted.
I remember that.
A few weeks later, we get baptized. And my parents went. My grandmother went. My Catholic grandmother. She went. And unfortunately, we didn't have the cool Baptist or the baptism t-shirts that we have now. Had the nice gowns back then, white gowns.
Yeah.
I remember looking over at some of our youth friends, Gracie and Megan. They were laughing at me because I was not happy about being in the robes, but I was sure happy to be baptized. I remember that. I don't remember. I wish I remembered who baptized me. It was probably Zach, but
yeah, him or Brother Jerry probably.
Him or Brother Jerry. But we got saved, got baptized, became members of the Lake Worth Baptist Church, and throughout middle school, continued to come to church as much as I could. And of course, as a teenager, you don't want to go all the time. But I do remember that your dad would drive up to my house and basically wake me up to go. And then sometimes it just wouldn't come out. But began coming to church faithfully, started serving. One of the first things I did to serve was be in the sound room, because that's where Bryce was at. He was working the slides. And he was back there with David Simpson. And I remember a whole lot of David telling me to knock it off because I guess I was causing some ruckus or something. And looking back, I'll have like a thought every now and then of a memory of me doing something dumb and me just kind of like cringing a bit at myself. I'm like, oh man. And then thinking, oh, but yeah, I mean, for that first little bit, I just kind of sat there next to Bryce and watched him run the slides. Then at some point, he started going on stage with the guitar. Then I stepped in on slides and started running slides. And I did that for a while. I think that was like my main servant area. And that's a ministry I'm still, I think I'm just starting to kind of moving on to others. And I'll get into that later, but serving in church and helping out with people move, whatnot, all these things that you do in church for your church family. And again, being familiar with everyone, going on youth trips like Winter Jam or any conference that was going on, like the Rogers Youth Conference or camp again, or the lock-ins that we would host here that we used to host, and a whole bunch of great memories in there. And on top of that, like my parents were becoming close with your parents, and I was getting close with your whole family. I'm starting to meet like your extended Reeves family and becoming friends with them, and just all of this involvement in church and just all this involvement in y'all's family, and just basically getting to a point to where like I'm just the bonus Reeves kid. And I was completely in love with where my life was going. I had, again, loving parents. I had my best friends who were basically family at this point. Saved in a church, serving in a church. My brother's saved. Towards the end of 8th grade, things are still going fine, but my mom starts getting really sick. And I don't know what kind of condition she had. I'd have to ask her what it was. But she would have seizures often. And it wasn't like epilepsy or anything, it was something else. And I remember one night my dad waking me up and telling me to go wait outside for an ambulance because something was up with Mom. And that first time I was pretty scared. And she ended up fine. They took her to the hospital and gave her whatever she needed and came back. But this would end up being like a routine thing. And it got to a point to where I started getting used to having paramedics, firemen, policemen. Even if it's medical, you get everybody showing up. And so I would be just familiar with having first responders over, knowing how to call 911. There was even a night to where the 911 operator was like really surprised on how calm I was on the phone, and I was just like, this isn't my first time.
Not my first rodeo, pal.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say that they recognized you.
They recognized me.
Like,
I became a
hey
regular.
Nick, how's it going, buddy? Same as usual. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, things were still fine. It just became a routine part of life at this point. Moving from middle school into high school. Moving schools had always been hard for me. I remember transitioning from elementary to middle. I was that one kid who was just bawling his eyes out on the first day of school. And I figured I'd be fine going into high school and a bit older, but there is that lingering thought. I'm like, am I going to just burst into tears when I get to school for the first time? It was my first time riding the bus too, which was different. Bigger school, and so it's way more people. Most of my friends went to different schools like Saginaw or Boswell. I went to Chisholm Trail. And luckily, Bryce was riding the bus with me, so we walked into the school together. And those first couple weeks, we did have like the same lunch, but we didn't have any of the same classes. But at lunch, we would meet up and hang out, but it was literally just us two hanging out at lunch. And then at some point, within that first 6 weeks of being there, he had a schedule change, and he wasn't in my lunch anymore. And that was difficult because I did know some people, but they were in different grades than me. Knew them through band, but a lot of them didn't have the same lunch as me. There were some seniors that I sort of knew. There was one guy that I knew pretty well. I'll get to him in a second. But other than that, I just didn't really see anybody I could sit with or hang out with. And so I just, instead of going and making friends, I just chose what any quiet introvert kid would do and just sit by himself. So there were a lot of times in that freshman year that I would sit by myself for, I want to say probably maybe the first 4 months or so, around December time. Maybe I'm going too far with that. It was probably maybe around October. So when I did see some friends that I was sort of familiar with, but wasn't sure if they'd allow me to sit there. And I did reach out to one of them, and they're like, of course you can sit with us. And so I sat with them, and one of the senior friends that I was talking about, he showed up and started sitting down with us. His name's Dakota Harvey. And he sort of took me under his wing. And if I'm being honest, he's probably the only high school friend that I still talk to. And funny enough, he was only in high school with me for a year. But I mean, he's a solid Christian guy. He's a full-time youth pastor at a church in Burleson, and just had a baby girl a couple days ago. So congrats to him. But I mean, he really sort of took me under his wing and knew I was a church guy, so we would talk about it from time to time. Of course, we were in band together, so we had that in common too. But yeah, not much other than that. In my freshman year, I want to say things started drastically changing for me sophomore year. Sophomore year is kind of what kicks off really everything. But sophomore year, man, it was a great year. Great year in high school. I have a lot of super fun memories, and I was in marching band at that time, and I had just joined choir, I believe, because I wanted to try that out. And as you know, my schedule will allow, I did have to be in like the freshman choir, which was kind of a bummer at first. But no, we ended up going to state that year for marching band, so we got to go to San Antonio and perform at the Alamo Dome. Super cool stuff. But this is actually when I first started having my first, I guess, like high school relationship. My first real one, anyway. And I bring her up because her and her family had a lot of influence on me in high school. She was a year younger. She was a freshman. And that's what kind of, made freshman choir not so bad because she was also in there. But she was super talented, super smart. So still probably one of the greatest singers I've heard, probably female singers I've heard. And that was starting to catch on, I think. But yeah, like her family had a lot of influence with me. I got close with her mom, and her dad took some time, but him and I got close too. Her parents were divorced, and her dad was just about to get married. It's maybe a year into our relationship, but her and I we just became best friends. Like, I'd bring her to church. She would actually sing up here a couple times in the youth group, and got close with, I guess, a few of the people here. She would always come over to my house because, like I said, her parents were divorced, and she loved coming to my house because my parents were still together, and we always had fun at home, and we would eat together as a family for the most part. And so she'd want to come over and just experience that. And she did become my best friend, and she was a good influence to me, a good Christian influence to me. But then summer after sophomore year, something happened between your mom and my mom because they worked together. And I won't go into those details because I don't really know all of them 100%. But it was a pretty big falling out between my mom, your mom, and then another photographer. And I was there for it. I was in this, they were in some photography studio. And I was there. I was just in the other room, but I did hear yelling. And at some point, my mom just had it in the conversation. And she came out in the hall, and so did your mom and that other photographer. And your mom and the photographer walked out. And I could just tell it was super tense. And that something really bad happened. And my mom comes up to me in tears, to me and Ben, and says, You're no longer allowed to see the Reeves family. And you're no longer allowed to go to church. Because I'm not going to have my kids around them. And that hurt. And it was super conflicting because, one, she is my mom and I love her. And I want to defend her. But it was more than just the Reeves family for me. And I didn't know how to express that at that age. I just kind of sort of just kept saying I just want to be with like my friends, like Bryce and Cam. But really it was all my friends here at the church too. It was my whole church family. And it just felt like whiplash. And so I was pretty heartbroken about it. And I remember reaching out to Bryce, texting him what happened. Basically, like, we can't. Oh, my parents won't let me be friends with you anymore. And there was still like this, we'll still hang out at school if we can. But again, we had different classes going on and just didn't really see each other. And I did text a couple of the other youth kids here, that I wasn't going to be able to go anymore, and just to pray. But this is where it starts to kind of take a turn, because now I'm a young believer having to navigate this world pretty much by myself. And thankfully, my girlfriend at the time, her and her mom did go to a non-denominational church, which I don't knock on all non-denominationals. I'm sure there are some out there that preach sound doctrine. And this one I didn't really add anything to it, but it was just kind of like you're doing great. Have a great week. Keep it up. And that one was okay. I enjoyed the music. I enjoyed the worship. They had a great program for that, a great facility. But I wasn't being fed. And even at 15, 16 years old at this point, I understand at least that I know what it's like to be fed spiritually. And then, but I would still go because it was something. And then her grandparents, I think, had moved to the area, and they were Methodist. And so they started going to a Methodist church in Saginaw. And I went with them. They started going to that Methodist church with them, and I went for the first time. And I had never been to a Methodist church. And I did feel a little bit more at home, I guess. The building was older, much like ours. So I did feel a little bit more at home in that regard, and the people were very nice. And there were some things that were off. They do have some practices. I mean, this is before the whole LGBTQ stuff happened. But they did still have some practices that were a little different. And then I was like, okay. And they had a bunch of hymns that I didn't really know. Because of course, I was familiar with the songs that we do here and the hymns that we do here. And so they did like 3 songs, and the first 2 songs I didn't know at all. And the third song was Blessed Assurance. And I was like, I know that one. I know that one well. But I didn't know there was a different version than the version that we did. And if you don't go to our church, or if you haven't been to camp and you haven't heard our version, we do like the third day version, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's a lot slower. And so that's what I was used to it. And whenever they started singing Blessed Assurance, I'm like, I'm going to sing my heart out for this song, thinking it's the slow version. And then they go, Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. I was like, okay, what is this? I'm like, why are we going 200 miles per hour on this? And then it just snapped me right back out of it again. And I was like, oh, come on. And of course, that's what you're thinking about as a teenager. You're like, oh, I'm not thinking about the words. I'm thinking about how the song's being done.
Right.
But after that, I just started getting more. I remember we left that service, went back to her mom's house to have lunch. I remember just bursting into tears. Because as strange as it was being at that church, I do think the building itself just reminded me a lot of how much I miss going to my church. And I started bursting into tears. I was really upset. And instead of just toughing it out or finding some other way to get to any Baptist church, I just chose not to go anymore. And I don't know really what my options were at that time. I still don't even know what I would have done different. I don't know, because I don't think I would have, even toughing it out in that Methodist church, I don't think it would have been good for me. But I stopped going, and because I stopped going, and because I'm a young Christian who doesn't really know how to navigate his Bible, read his Bible. And while we do use KJV here, I mean, KJV is it's a difficult translation for a teenager to read at first. And so nothing was really just like clicking to me, and I just wasn't invested. And so if you're not going a righteous way, you're going to go an unrighteous way. And so that's exactly what I did. And so, you know, me and my girlfriend at that time started doing things we're not supposed to, regrettably. And then I'm acting in ways I shouldn't have, mouthing off and just acting like the world, entertaining worldly things, embracing it. But even with all that, you know, I do look at that time as somewhat good. You know, I was still enjoying life, just not in a way I should have been for some of it. But I mean, my family was still going strong. I enjoyed being with my family. I look back at some of the pictures from that time, and I definitely looked like a grumpy teenager, but my face did not match how I was. And maybe I was just hiding it, you know, but I really did enjoy that time. But as I went into junior year, I got some leadership roles in the marching band, which is a pretty big thing for that. And so took on some of those responsibilities and started seeing myself as a leader in some regard. And I remember feeling God kind of knock on my heart a little bit about that, about what a potential calling could be. But I didn't really get a glimpse of what God wanted me to do until I got invited to my girlfriend's dad's wedding. Her dad and stepmom lived together for a while, so I known her the whole time we were together. But they were finally getting married, and they invited me to go because I was really close to the family at this point. So I went to the wedding, and I remember sitting down, looking up at the altar, and it was my girlfriend's stepbrother officiating. And I remember sitting there and having that thought of, you're going to do that someday. And then following that immediately was, nope, definitely not. This quiet kid who barely wants to get up in front of people. Like, you tell me to get in front of a whole wedding crowd? Nah, I'm not ever doing that. But anyhow, moving into my junior year, just still living sinful, acting ways I shouldn't, doing things I shouldn't. But I told you that my girlfriend at the time was really talented, and a lot of people were starting to notice. And a lot of teachers, a lot of directors for choir, band, or in theater were all starting to notice too. And she was becoming pretty well known to everybody. She was like, both of us were kind of like one of those couples that everyone just knew were together and were like one of the power couples, I guess. And she was becoming a big name, and a lot of people were wanting to see her do shows and want her to do leadership at some point. She was being, I guess, inducted into the NHS deal for all the smart kids. And for me, I wasn't really getting as much of those opportunities. And I knew I had it in me to meet that certain potential. I just didn't know how to. And I didn't really speak up about it. So instead of doing something about it, instead of growing myself, I just sat with envy. And when I let that envy just kind of sit, you're happy for her, but at the same time, you're not. And that started to become more and more frequent as time went on. And it got to a point to where I was seeing her as so great that I figured at any point she'd probably leave me because she'd realized that she was probably too good for me. And that was a real thought I had, and I let it get to me. But kept going. We ended up having Thanksgiving with her family, like my family, her mom and brother came and had Thanksgiving with us, and that was a good time. And then at some point during this time period, but just before 2017, my parents' marriage was starting to shake a little bit. There was a storm coming, and I sort of saw it, but I didn't really understand what. And there was one night where things went very sideways. And I won't go into specifics, but I saw both my parents at an all-time low, which again was another 180 for me, for everything. I go from this home that's so happy to just broken and completely destroyed, all right in front of me. Sheltered my brother from it as much as I could, but I got everything, mostly everything. And I know they were both pretty heartbroken about not just what happened between them, but but also that I got caught in it. But I was mixed with so many different emotions. Nothing was making sense to me anymore. You know, I lost my best friend. I lost my church family. Now I was losing my family. And I was just so filled with anger. You know, I tried to show as much grace as I could. But I remember there came a point to where I was just hateful. You know, I hated my parents. I hated this church. I hated your parents. I hated everybody. Because what did I do? I was just living my life as a teenager, as a kid. And I saw it all as unfair. Like, why is everything being taken? And then I feared losing my girlfriend, who, after I lost all my close friends from church, was really the only really close friend that I had was this girl. And I was scared I was going to lose her too. But not only am I just angry about my situation, but now I'm filled with envy still. I'm having all of these negative emotions that I don't know how to deal with it, and so I'm just starting to bottle it up. And I started to get pretty toxic. I started noticing that my life was falling apart, and instead of trying to do something about it, I instead was going to be angry at everybody for it. And I remember my girlfriend trying to encourage me a lot. But I just wouldn't hear it. There were even a couple times I had admitted to her that I figured she would think she's too good for me. And she would assure me with all sorts of compassion and genuineness that, like, she wasn't going to go anywhere. And then the summer before, this is summer of 2017, we moved out of my childhood home into another house. My parents couldn't afford to split up into different homes. So it was pretty much upstairs was dad's, downstairs was mom's. And they made it work, I guess. I mean, we were all still breathing in the house. But that there was always tension. And now I'm in a home that I wouldn't even, like, my home is not this new house. It's the Kentucky Derby house. And so I'm reaching my all-time peak of instability. And again, summer 2017, we're about to start band camp up again. It's my senior year coming up. We have our fitness camp go on in the morning. And then right after the fitness camp, like right after, no one's gone home yet. This is right after everything. My girlfriend pulls me aside into this private area. And she says, "Nick, I think we have to break up." The thing I feared the most at that time was right in front of me. And I had realized I hadn't really cried in like a year. I mean, when my whole family just flipped upside down, like everyone else was crying, so I had to be the strong one. I had to be the one who was emotionally stable, not showing any emotion.
Well, you had to protect yourself and then protect Ben.
Yeah.
So you kind of had to be strong.
I had to mature a lot.
Sure.
And there were times that, I did feel like the parent. And when she told me that she wanted to break up, she said she delivered it the best way I think she could. And I don't remember a lot of what's said, but I do remember a couple things that stuck. And one of them was just, I don't want to be with someone who has divorced parents like me. That one hurt. I don't know if she meant it as harsh as it came out, but that one hurt. And then going into senior year, everyone's looking for colleges at this point. I wasn't. And her family was very much, you got to go to college. That's what you have to do. And with everything going on, it just wasn't on my mind. And what I wanted to do with my life, I didn't know. It wasn't obvious to me yet. And so the second thing that she says is like, you don't have ambition. Like, you show up to all my stuff that I do, all my recitals and everything, but I don't have anything to show up to you for. And a couple more things were said, and she said her goodbye. And I remember walking out of this private area, going back to the band hall, and all of the peers that I have still in there. A couple guys, I was a trumpet player, a couple guys in my trumpet section kind of locked eyes with me and noticed that I was about to not be okay. And I realized that too. I was like, I think I'm about to cry. And I go in the locker room and I just wail. I'm practically screaming. Because it's like this breakup was like just the last thing that I had at that moment. Or so I thought, And I did have a couple friends comfort me and reassure me. And kind of help me through getting through that. But it was hard. It was really hard. And there were a handful of people who left along with her. And, it kind of went from like this popular crowd to really back to nobody again. And I was so done. I've lost my best friends. I've lost my church. I've lost my family. I've lost my house that I grew up in. I've lost my girlfriend, my best friend. I didn't know what else to do. But I didn't want to deal with anything anymore. I was over it. And so I remember it was one day I decided I was going to take my life. And I remember going up to my room. And I was about to make the choice to do it. I turned on the radio in my room and just put my phone on shuffle songs, whatever. I didn't care what was playing. Just something to have on while I did it. And in that moment, it was so dark. It was so dark. And it was like in that moment, I had remembered that there's one thing I can do. And I just started praying. I had not prayed at all, I don't think, apart from being at church for a congregation prayer, like we talked about, praying together. I don't think I had ever, in the history of me being saved, had ever prayed just me by myself. In that moment, in those what would be my last few moments, I pray to God, help. Help. And as I'm praying, the song No Longer Slaves by Bethel Music comes on. And I don't support what Bethel Church does. Just putting that out there. I don't. A lot of weird stuff. But I think with the song, they got it right. Because as I was praying, I just heard, I'm no longer a slave to fear, because I am a child of God. And in that second, I remembered who I was. I remembered whose I am. In that moment, I was asking God, where are you? And in that moment, he was saying, I'm right here. I've been right beside you this whole time. Just waiting for you. And so I chose not to. And yeah, I just pray to God, just help, just change something. Because I need something. And a week went by, and I'm seeing who's now my ex-girlfriend, with a guy that I was pretty close friends with, I had thought. They had just gotten together a couple weeks after we had broken up. And when you share a couple years with somebody, when you get close to their family, and when you do things outside of marriage, you feel a little closer to somebody.
Oh, for sure.
And so when you see that person with somebody else, especially so short after, that stuff just kind of stirs up again. And I'm not suicidal at this point. There is some sort of peace, I guess. But my morale is just tanked. And again, like I said earlier, like I'm a leader in this band, this marching band thing. And as a senior, a lot more people are looking up to me. And I guess it was getting to a point to where my band director, the head band director, was starting to notice. I wasn't acting out or anything, but I just wasn't as in it as I had been. You know, I wasn't running anywhere where I needed to run, or wasn't being as energetic as I had usually been. So after practice, it was like August. After practice, he calls me into his office. He sits me down and he just asks me what's going on. And I tell him what's on my mind in that moment. Like, I'm upset about this, about them two being together. I'm upset about, kind of where my life's at right now. And he just said, "You're a Christian, right?" I was like, yes, sir. Which caught me by surprise. Never thought a teacher would ask me that. "You're a Christian, right?" I said, "Yeah." Pulls out his Bible from his desk. And he reads to me 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7. Love is patient, love is kind. Does not boast or envy. It's not arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoings, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. He read that to me and said, if you really love that girl, if you really love your parents, if you really love your church, if you really love all these people, act like this. Love like this. Like you can't control the relationship. Like, it ended. She can be with whoever she wants. It's like, but you can control you. And you don't have to destroy those memories that you had. Because he knew who we both were. And there are a lot of kids in our band, but he knew who we both were. And he knew, how, like, our relationship, how that dynamic that we had. He's like, you guys had great memories. Like, just don't destroy that. And he saw that, of course he saw that my morale was down and that I wasn't doing okay. And in that moment, he asked if he could pray with me. Something no one had done in a while. And so I appreciate him for it. But he prayed with me and told me to get back to whatever lesson. But it was in the moment between almost taking my life and the moment with my band director that I was starting to remember again just who I was and start to fully understand the weight of that. John 1:12 says, but as many received him, to give them he gave power to those to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. Romans 8:28, and we know that those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. I'm a child of God. No one can pluck me from the Father's hand.
That's right.
When you're saved, no one can make you unsaved. You're eternally in his hand. And again, that goes back to my verse, John 16:33. I can overcome. A week after that, I get my license. I get my first car. I go to my parents. It had been a year and a half since I had been to church. I go to my parents and I ask, can I go to church? They said yes. So Ben and I both get in the car, make our way to church, and we both get there, pull into the parking lot, and I wasn't scared to walk in until I pulled into the parking lot. Because after how everything went with my mom and your mom, I wasn't sure how that was going to be received. And this is a year and a half of me being just completely going through it, losing so much. And it was, I'd been just in this environment of people I felt at the time abandoning me. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to be received. There was a part of me that was really telling myself that we were going to get turned away, which is silly to think about now, but I really did. But we went in anyway. Bro, I just remember seeing your dad. Everyone hugged the crap out of me, dude. There's so much love. So much love coming towards us. And I just finally felt okay. I finally felt back home. I finally felt stable. I'm welcomed by Zach. Welcomed by Brother Jerry. Everyone's super excited to see us again. And going into senior year, Ben and I are attending church again. I'm still working on my depression and my anger. I did still have moments where I was acting in ways I shouldn't. Even though my band director had, told me that verse, wasn't really living it. Still letting that anger sort of simmer. And I guess about halfway through senior year, mom and dad finally could afford moving away from each other. And that helped. As much as I wanted them to stay together, the tension was getting pretty bad. And so, Ben stayed with dad and I went with mom. Because mom, through all of this, mom is still having her sickness fits. And so I was the oldest. I was more familiar with doing it. And everyone was just kind of more... It made more sense for me to go with mom. So I went with mom and we moved into an apartment, or a pretty nice apartment. And it felt like things were starting to clear up more and more. And end of senior year comes. I'm skipping through a lot of senior year. It was all just kind of, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get out of here. I wasn't going to go to college. I had started working at McAllister's Deli in Lake Worth. I had just opened up. And Bryce was working there. Can't remember. All of our friends were working there.
I worked there for 3 weeks at one point. Yeah. We all passed through there eventually.
Started working there and, got my diploma. Never looked back. And I did reach out to my ex. She was still with the other guy. I did reach out to her and apologize just for how I acted, because I was acting like a jerk. Just a big jerk. There had been a couple moments where she was trying to build that bridge back up and I just kept burning it. And just being unnecessarily rude. And, I apologized for all of that. And she forgave me. I apologized to some other people that I was just rude to and mean to. And those first, even after a couple months after graduation, like I was still kind of going through a tour of apologizing to people. Like going to certain people and just apologizing for what I had done, because God had really convicted me about how I was acting. The more I was being involved in church and it was coming back into y'all's lives, and there were a couple times that I was acting like a jerk at your parents' house, and your dad coming up to me a couple times and be like, "That's not okay. That's not flying here." I was like, "Yes, sir." Graduate. Summer 2018 comes around. Back to camp for the first time in forever. Started feeling the call to preach, but I as a natural introvert, didn't really want to go full all out preacher yet. So I was trying to compromise a little bit. Like maybe it's youth ministry or something. So started thinking about preaching. I was doing more slides again. This is when I start kind of, really changing the slides up a little bit from just like a little PowerPoint to actual moving graphic stuff that we have now. Sort of entertaining it. Move into the White House with you guys. We've talked about the White House a little bit in your testimony episode. That little White House that was next to our church that I'd say I made it work. I made it look real nice.
As nice as it could have been.
As nice as it could have been. Could have been way better. But with 4 dudes in a house, it worked. Started developing like my friendship with you. You and I started getting closer. Me and Chase started getting closer. Another guy who used to come here. And then I guess at camp, I met this other girl on the last night. And, we passed by, said hi to each other. And again, you'll see you've probably seen a running theme here. Like relationships were kind of where God was dealing with me. Because that was just something I was always chasing at this point. There was always some sort of relationship after relationship. And met this girl this last night at camp, and I didn't think much of it. But in the fall of 2018, she reached out to me, sent me a direct message through Instagram or Facebook or something, and we started talking, texting back and forth, and she lived in Illinois, southern Illinois, and it's a bit far, but we decided that we wanted to try long distance, so we did for a little while. It was short-lived, though. Dated a couple months, broke up early 2019. This is where I'm starting to take like odd jobs after McAllister's, start working for an event companies, finding myself like working at bars, music in bars and all this other stuff, traveling a little bit. And spring of 2019, some time's gone by, and Mom calls me and asks me to come to her apartment, and so I do. And when I get there, I'm pretty surprised to see my dad's there too. And she has all of us sit down, and she says, "Well, boys, I've got cancer. It was like stage 4 or some sort of stomach cancer." And of course, my first thought was, of course, just another bad thing. So we were dealing with that, facing that. She said she was going to fight it, and it did get pretty bad. It had its waves at first. But there came a moment where, from like the time that she told us, I guess a couple months through, I want to say it got bad starting in the like getting real bad towards the middle of summer. Summer 2019, go to camp again. I knew I had a call for ministry, but I hadn't really surrendered to it yet. So summer 2019, I end up dating this girl again, the girl from camp who lived in southern Illinois. Her whole church came down to this camp, this same camp that I was saved at. First time at camp as a couple. This is actually the first time I met Tom Plemons, our very own. when he was still going to that church, which is so weird to think about. It's so hard to think about Tom and Crystal not being members here. They've just been here for so long now. But yeah, that's when I first met him, and it's when our wasp incident happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That was 2019. Yeah.
The famous wasp story, and you getting the news about Addison.
Yeah. That was the year.
And while you were going through that, God was really convicting me about ministry. Really hard. And because of everything that I had gone through and how God had been faithful to me, I really wanted to invest in teenagers. I really did have a heart for it, and I still do. But I thought for sure, like, my end game was youth ministry. And so, I remember after camp, I go up to Zach and I tell him, I'm like, God's calling me to ministry. He's calling me to preach to youth ministry. And he was so happy for me. It was when we were, we do it every year, like the debrief after camp of just kind of telling everyone like how camp went in our afternoon service. And I told him right before we were going to go up and do that. And so when we had that afternoon service, I came before the church and told them that I had surrendered to youth ministry, surrendered to preach, and got a lot of support there from it. And August, that was in July. So August, this girlfriend from camp comes down to Texas to visit. And we have a great week. And it was like the first time we were together, like we were starting to get close. And then like the second time we were together, it just felt like we were getting closer. And I thought it was a great trip, but we both had something that just wasn't clicking. And I had some struggles that I needed to deal with. And things almost went a bit far. And because of it, we broke up. And I was pretty devastated about it. Both times I was devastated, but the second time a little bit more than the first. I think because it felt closer. We felt closer than before. And I remember I dropped her off at her brother's, and she was going to fly back home. And that next day, again, this is the White House right next to the church. I'm just laying in bed. I wasn't working that day. I think all of you guys were out working. And I just needed to talk to Zach. I really don't remember the thought process of it. I just got up, put some shoes on, and left. Walked next door. I have keys to the church, so I go through the gym and walk through all the halls, make my way to the office building, and sure enough, there he is in his office by himself. And this before Dan was on staff and before Judy was on staff, so it was just him in there. And I walk in and I just like burst into tears again and just tell him everything. And again, I was being received with so much love and so much encouragement, and all of it was just so alien to me. Like it even being in church at that time and being somewhat invested in serving, just moments like this were just still they were just so weird. It was nice, but it just seemed weird. And he helped me get through some of my struggles a little bit. and really started discipling me. That was when I think him discipling me really started. You know, you and CJ were talking about how, you know, he'd have those Bible studies with you guys, and I don't know if those were still going on at that time, because he used to, because I don't think those were still going on when I went up to him, because he started doing it with me in his office on Monday nights. Me and Cameron for a little bit, but it just ended up being me primarily, and begins teaching me, and you know, I'm getting invested in youth ministry, and then at some point he says, "How would you feel about going to school?" I was like, I would love to go to school, but I don't have any money. He's like, I didn't ask if you had any money. I asked if you wanted to go to school. I was like, yeah. And he's like, we'll find you a school. We'll see. We'll get the church and get with the church and see if they'll approve it, the money for it. He's like, but we'll invest in you. Like, I want to invest in you. And so I was like, that's great. Okay. I guess we'll do that. And again, this was a foreign thing to me. And but again, I wasn't really taking much initiative to it. He said, well, whenever you're ready to do it, let's do it. Let's sit down to it. And I just really wasn't taking it seriously yet. Fall 2019 comes around, and that same girlfriend from church camp reaches out, and a lot of hard discussions, but we end up getting back together. Third time's a charm, dude. Third time's a charm. And it's just every time it seemed different. It seemed more matured. And so I was like, yeah, well, let's try it. And, you know, I said that this was a time that Mom's cancer was getting pretty bad, and it did. And again, I'm still dealing with some of my anger. It took a long time for that anger from way back in 2017 to kind of go away fully. And I was still sort of dealing with it. And there was one day that, because I moved out of the White House, I moved in with Mom, because you and Haley were about to have Addie, and
yeah, we kind of took it over as a couple, and we didn't live there long after that either, honestly. But yeah, people started to kind of depart.
Yeah, like Chase had gone, and I think Bryce was married at this point, so him and Jenna were gone, and then you were about to have your thing. So I left, moved in with Mom, and there were a lot of fights between me and her, and all of them instigated by me, of course. And there was one night that was the last night I've ever yelled at my mom. Shouldn't be yelling at my mother anyway, but it was the last time I yelled at my mom. I don't remember what we were yelling at each other about, but later that night, I don't remember. Maybe I called 911 or she did. I don't remember. But she was pretty bad. It's like one of those nights where you're like, I don't know if you're going to make it till the morning. And I'm not really thinking about the argument that we had earlier. Just not thinking about that. Just thinking about her. And I'm terrified. But again, I'm masking it as best I can. Paramedics get there. Police get there. They're doing their thing on her, and they They take her to the hospital, and one of the paramedics, I guess, mentioned that all of this was caused by some sort of stress, some sort of like crazed stress. And this police officer, he asked me, he's like, "Do you know why your mom like would just like spike with all this all of a sudden?" And I just started thinking back. I'm like, the only thing I think of is the screaming match that we had earlier that night. I was like, well, we had a fight earlier that night. And I guess, one shouldn't have been doing it, but I guess that just wasn't the answer the officer wanted to hear at all. And he just looked at me and he said, "Well, son, if your mom dies tonight, it's your fault." Destroys me. He leaves my house. Just laying I don't go back to bed. I'm laying on my bed, but I'm not sleeping. And the next morning comes around, and I find out she's going to be fine. My dad was with her. He went up there with her, and she turned out okay. But I had told my girlfriend at the time from camp. I told her about it, and bless her, she drove down immediately and spent time with me in those first few days. She was there for a few days, and she helped as she could. And but mom was doing okay. She was back to her usual self. Again, didn't yell at my mom after that. Just try to wrestle a bit more with myself and keeping my emotions in check. But I'm continuing to work at McAllister's. This time I had gone from McAllister's in Lake Worth to McAllister's in Heritage Trace, Keller Alliance area. I moved there because Bryce was working there for a minute, and I managed to get a job back over there with him. And as I'm working there, I've been working there for probably about a year now at this point. And March 2020 rolls around. COVID hits. And that was such a weird day because it was like everyone was excited because it was an extended spring break. And I remember all the teachers coming in like all super happy that they get an extra day off at the restaurant. And then as the day went on, I guess the news was starting to roll out more and more and more. And I remember my manager coming up to me and saying like, "Hey, we need to start taking certain things off the tables and like doing all this weird stuff." And I was like, okay. So we were doing like a lot of weird things in the restaurant. Such an odd time. And then maybe a couple weeks after that, they stopped scheduling people. So I wasn't working as much. But again, I'm living with my mom. So I don't really need money as much. And I just somehow always had money. I don't really know where it was coming from. But I'm sort of out of the job, and now I've got all the time in the world. And my thought is, I'm going to drive across the country to see my girlfriend. Got nothing else to do. And so got my car, made the trip, stopped in Missouri, because that's where Chase lives now. Stopped there for a day, hung out with him and his family. Went up to Southern Illinois, spent some time there, had a great week with them. And I was starting to really, I felt I was starting to get closer to her family. I had spoken with her brother a couple times. He lives here in this area. Spoken with him a couple times, met with him a few times, and I was just getting close with the family, it felt like. And she was planning on moving down from Illinois to Texas, over close to where her brother lives, which isn't far from here. And so things are starting to click for me, I think. And I'm like, well, this is great. She's moving down. And there was a moment where we're being young people in love, and we're, talking about, like marriage or whatnot, and doing whatever to pass the time, making a list of like things we would want at a wedding, whatnot. And then one of the last days I was there, I was staying at they had like a guest house I was staying at, and because her dad's the pastor, and so I was in that like extra house over by the church, and so she came by, and she told me, I've been struggling with some things, and I'm sorry, but I just need to work them out on my own. And I just sat there for a minute, and I just like couldn't believe that this was happening again. Because for me, like, this was checking all sorts of boxes for me. I was like, this is a Christian girl who knows all the people I do, has known all the people I do for all her life. She goes to camp, and, she's a pastor's daughter, and her brother's a preacher too, and like Baptist girl. I'm like, this was checking all the boxes for me. I'm like, why is this not working for me? And again, I just lost it. And I was just like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, why is this not working for me? And, her and her family didn't want me to immediately go home after that happened. They made me stay just one more day because they were like, you're not doing okay. I'm like, we need you to be at least somewhat mentally stable. Because it's a 12-hour drive, and so like I get it. So I did stay one more day, and it was the longest day. But her family were still so very loving to me. That last day, and we're understanding that it was a hard thing that was heartbreaking thing that was happening. And so I make the long drive home. That next day, after I had stayed the whole day, and I remember parking on the side of the road as soon as I left their house, and first person I called was my mom. And I was holding myself together okay this day. I was like, I'm just going to tell her what happened, and then I'm coming home a little bit early. But the first few words that I heard come out of her mouth, she was like, "Hey, sweetie, how are you?" I was bawling my eyes out, dude.
Not good, Mom.
This is not doing good.
Not well.
And, well, like, I didn't even make a noise. I was just like, "Hey, Mom." And she said, "Hey, sweetie, how are you?" And there was just silence. And she goes, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Mom." But, no, I make the drive. She tells me, just come on home. I get about halfway. I stop somewhere. I think it's like Arkansas. Stop somewhere on the side of the road and just kind of sit there for a moment. And this is really the point in time to where I was like, okay, God, I get it. Not my will. Yours. When I get back home, I'm not going to be, it's no more putting it off. It's no more chasing relationships. It's no more living life my way. I'm like, if you want me, you can have all of me. And so I said that, got back in my car, drove the rest of the time. And of course, I come home and everyone's like, "Come on, Nick," give me a hard time in love. But, I know all you guys were super caring for me and encouraging to me. And I'll tell you what, man, like, as soon as like that trip was hard, and coming back was really hard. But once I had settled that, once I had come to terms that like, this is what God, you have my life now. Like, I get it. No more putting it off. Once I got to that conclusion, like when I came home, everything felt different. Everything did. And we were actually getting evicted. I came back and we got like an eviction notice because the owner of the house that we were now in, he wanted to move his brother in. So he's like, you guys got to get out. And so it was like the super last minute thing. We had to pack up everything super quick. It even got to a point to where I asked your dad, I was like, hey, I need you to grab a bunch of guys, a bunch of people from our church.
I remember that. Yeah.
And, you know, again, thanks be to God for a faithful church to where if you need help, people will come. And so over 20 people came to this thing and just helped us pack up and move within hours. And, you know, God was, again, faithful and, you know, brought us into a house that was so much better than the one that we were already in. I was even like, how are we affording this? But no, we moved into this new house and everything just felt so much better. It was hard, sure. But, you know, my mom was cleared of cancer.
Amen.
They any remnant that was left, they cut out of her stomach, and so she had that gastric bypass surgery. And once that was out, she was pretty much back to normal. She had a couple episodes here and there, but nothing too bad. And I get back to work at McAllister's for a little bit, and then we were still in the quarantine area, so it was a little touchy with scheduling. So I asked Zach if he had any ideas for jobs or something, and luckily his mom, Teresa, I guess had mentioned to him that there was an opening at her office. It was like some small part-time thing, but it was something. And, you know, I really enjoyed working there. It definitely kind of grew me in that field of, you know, what it's like to work in an office a little bit. I got to be able to, I guess, develop a relationship, a friendship with Teresa, because I hadn't really talked to her at all prior to this, but I was able to, you know, hang out with her a few times and get to know her. And Robert too, he would come in a bunch. And then I got transferred to White Settlement location, and I was there for maybe a month, and I was done with it. And it was just like, you know, making sale. It was just like cold calling, and I just hated it. So I was done with that. I went back to McAllister's, and this is fall of 2020. I get back to McAllister's, and I didn't mention this before, but when I started working at this particular McAllister's in Heritage Trace back in 2018, Crystal worked there. So we worked together for like a month before she went back to college. And so we knew of each other. I knew her enough to know her name, and that was about it. So when I came in of fall 2020, I walked in the front door of the restaurant, asked for my job back since the State Farm thing didn't work out. And she was working the register. And I hadn't seen her forever. So I was like, hey. And I walked up to her, and she's like, oh, I say, hi, Crystal. Or no, she goes, you're Nick, right? I'm like, yes, Crystal. Yes, I am Nick. And then I asked for the manager, and talked to her, and asked for my job back. And of course I said yes. I was a good worker there. And funny enough, they asked my general manager there asked, well, like, whatever shift you want, which one you want. Like, you can have it. Like that's where I was at with this restaurant. Like, I was that good at it. A little prideful, but sure. And I asked for just the earliest one, because the earliest in is the earliest out. And so I picked that one, and that one was crystals, and I didn't know it.
God knew it.
Yep. But yeah, I started working there again. I remember my first day I walked in, I started opening stuff. And she swears that she didn't hear me. But when she walked in, I said, "Good morning, Crystal." And she just walked right past me, not saying a word. And I was like, cool, great start. But I'm sure she didn't hear me, but it's funny to still give her a hard time about it. But she was dating this other guy who was just a super toxic dude. It's not the best guy. And I remember that she had been dating, I guess she had started dating this guy back in 2018. So, because they were together whenever we were working together for that month. And I'm not pursuing a relationship at this point. Genuinely not. I'm there to do work. And then, I was there to do work. And if I wasn't at work, I was at church doing something in the youth room, just to keep myself busy. And, but we became good friends because we were working front of house together. And we had we shared pretty much every single day together on a shift. So you become quickly, either you're going to be this person's bane of existence every single day, or you're going to be friends with this person. And so we became pretty good friends. We enjoyed working together. When we started getting close, I started asking, like, do you go to church? And she mentioned that she was a Catholic, and she came from a Catholic family, and as a Baptist and a seminary, soon to be a seminary student, I was provoking these questions, asking her about her faith, and had a lot of good discussions about it. And then with that came also, like, there were a couple times that she'd walk into work where, her boyfriend would say, like, "Hey, let's meet for breakfast," and then would, like, stand her up. And so she'd come into work super early, and I'd be like, "What are you doing here so early?" And then she'd tell me what happened. And it just got to a point to where, like, we were getting pretty close as friends, and she was kind of telling me everything that was going on in the relationship, and I was just kind of saying, like, well, like, I don't understand why you're still with him. Like, you're not married. I was like, well, why are you still with him? And she's like, well, I've just been with him forever. And it's been like 2 years at this point, almost 3. And it did come to a point to where, I did start to catch feelings, because I was just seeing her being mistreated a lot. And it started to make me just a little bit protective. And then, I saw her, like, playfully hugging one of the other coworkers that was a dude. And I felt like that same feeling of jealousy. And I was like, huh? I was like, why am I feeling that? And then there was one morning where it was my birthday. I was working on my birthday. And again, we're still friends. And she got me a card. And I was really into drinking Red Bulls at the time. She got me a Red Bull. And then she bought me breakfast. And she was like, "I'm just being a good friend." And I'm sure she believed that at that time. But I was sitting there thinking, like, this is not what friends do.
This is what wives do.
Yeah. I'm like, I was like, I am all for it. I appreciate it. But this is interesting. But it then came to a point where I was starting to catch feelings, and, like, I wasn't intentionally trying to, like, there was no ill will in trying to destroy a relationship, but it was just like, this relationship's already like it's getting bad to a point to where, like, you're not getting hurt physically yet, or mentally yet, but I can foresee this happening. It was just getting way too chaotic. And so I asked her about it. I'm like, why? Like, really, why? And she's like, well, I just don't want to be alone. And I just said, I'm like, you ain't. You won't be. And, she did end up leaving him, which was good. And then just a little bit later, we got together. We tried it out, and we wanted to be boyfriend, girlfriend. I started bringing her around here, around you guys, and we would have these theological conversations, but bad on me, I never asked about salvation. I think a part of me just didn't want to know.
Sure.
Or just wanted to assume. And so I never asked about it. I just assumed. And again, bad on me, shouldn't have. But, I was bringing her here, and there's a couple times that your dad still teaches up in the youth room too with me. So there was one night that, your dad had everybody close their eyes, and like, if you don't think you're saved, just look up at me. And she was one of those people. I didn't know about it.
Classic tactics,
Yep.
bro. Been used for like 60 or 70 years. Still works.
But of course I didn't know. And your dad knew. And so, but that night she didn't say anything. And, then comes summer 2021. Take her to camp, because everyone's talking about camp. She's starting to get close with like all my friends now too, and everybody else was going to camp, and she wanted to go also, and so she came with, and I don't know if it was the first or second night, but maybe it was the first night. Yeah, the first night, I'm in the dorm. I think we just got done with night devotions. And your dad gets a phone call or a text or something. And he looks at me and he's like, we got to go to the girls' cabin like right now. And of course I'm thinking like, what happened? Like, I'm not even thinking about
what could this possibly
be? I'm like,
be?
what could this, like, why do you need me? And like, two, what happened? And so we go and walk down to the girls' cabin, and Rochelle Keehan, one of our members here, she's outside with Crystal. And Rochelle says, tell them what you just did tonight. And Crystal said, I just accepted Christ as my Savior.
Amen.
I wanted to hug her, but your dad intercepted, bro. But I was also in shock, just because, again, I never asked, so I didn't know. And there was a part of me that just felt like a lot of guilt because I didn't ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, your dad like swooped in, hugged her tight, and he's like, I've been praying about that for a while. He's like, ever since you looked up that night, like, I've been praying hard about it. And, I just so happy. I had a little bit of guilt, but I had a lot more joy. And so she trusted in Christ that night, and we talked about it. And I was like, well, what got you to, like, what sparked that for you? And she's like, and we were just, everyone was going around telling their testimonies of faith, and like, I didn't have one. And I started to question it. And I guess her and Rochelle talked, and she was like, well, I gotta get saved. So she trusted in Christ, and a few weeks later she got baptized, the same time that Your wife got baptized and Jenna got baptized.
Yeah.
3 in one day. And I still have Crystal's baptism like pinned on my Facebook page. It probably ain't never going down, but it's such a good day, dude. So awesome to see. And I remember your mom like handing me tissues because anytime anybody gets like, and I'm like outing myself now, so now all of our church members are gonna be looking at me when people get baptized, but anytime someone gets baptized, I'm fighting tears. And so, but when I saw her, I was crying again. Then it just came to a point where I was like, I don't want to live a life without this girl. I really don't. And I do also want to kind of like say this, that when I came to this conclusion, we had been only dating for 6 months, 8 months, something like that. And I didn't ever really go over to her parents' house. She lived with her parents, but she often came over to my house. So I probably went over to her house maybe once or twice. So her family didn't really know me that well. And bad on me, I wasn't going to plan on asking for a blessing because I knew what they were probably going to say, and I didn't want to hear it. On one hand, I really wanted to marry this girl. On the other hand, I didn't want to wait. And I knew that they were probably not going to be supportive because they barely knew me. But I just wanted to. And beginning of August, I proposed. And we told her family after. And how would you feel if your daughter was dating a guy that you hardly knew at all, showed up one day and said, "I'm engaged"? Probably wouldn't be too enthusiastic. And so it was received just about that. Understandably. And there was a lot of strife there for a little bit. I said a lot of things that I shouldn't have said. And they said a lot of things that they admit they shouldn't have said. A lot of things I did that I shouldn't have done. And same for them. But it got difficult. They were pretty heartbroken. And I wasn't acting the way I should have. I wasn't handling it the way I should have. And for all they know, it was just some stranger trying to take their daughter away from them. And so I think their reactions were completely understandable. But of course, I knew me, and everyone else knew. And I didn't see myself as a, it was like, I know I'm a stranger, but I don't think I'm a bad dude. But of course, no one sees that. Nobody sees that for a stranger, especially not in these days today. So, November 2021, wedding comes around. And they do show up. It's a small wedding. It's just a little bit of my family. You guys were all there.
It was small, but it was nice. Good venue.
Yeah.
It was pretty.
It was a public place. We didn't even pay for it. It was just kind of like we grabbed chairs from the church, set up in the park, get up and get it all done in enough time before, some kid's soccer practice starts or something, or sprinklers go off or something. And I remember before the service started, obviously it was a bittersweet day. You know, we were happy to be getting married, but we were also pretty sad that not 100% support from her side. And it really got to a point, Kyle, where I didn't think we were going to have a relationship with her family. You know, I didn't, just at the point that it got to, with how much strife and hostility, I didn't see it getting good. And I felt like I had messed up. And I just wanted to convey to them that, you know, that I wasn't a bad guy, but I understood at the same time. And it was a conflicting time for me right there. And of course, today I'm also the sickest I've ever been, health-wise. Never been so sick. And you know, I'm loaded up on all the aspirin, Advil, Tylenol, what have you, just to keep me up straight. And I'm super stressed about everything, just the general nerves of a wedding. And I was like, I was all over the place. I think your dad saw it because he walked up to me and he just put his arm around me and just said, like, I know it seems impossible, but just love their daughter like Christ would love her, and love them like Christ would love them. It's like, as long as you do that, they will come around. And that helped. Even though I didn't think I still wasn't convinced completely. But I'll tell you what, it was a slow start, but it is polar opposite than it was that day. You know, the relationship I have with her family now is that reconciliation is something that only God can do if he's in it. Like, I don't see, like, how the love I have for them, the love that they have, the love that all of them have for me, it doesn't seem like this is something that ever happened. And I say that because and I'll get to it, but we get married. You know, things are going fine with her family, and we're starting to reconcile that a bit. I've started seminary, but I'm getting to a point at the end of 2021 where I'm starting to get a little tiny bit burnt out on ministry stuff. The school I'm in, I had been in for a year at that point, and I just wasn't. I was getting more questions about what I was being taught than I was answers. And there were a couple of things that, you know, I had to bring to Zach of, are you sure that's right? And so I was just kind of burnt out on it. I didn't really feel it. And then Zach took me to the Amen conference, where Tyler Prater in that church. And that's where I heard Kurt Skelly preach for the first time. And when I heard that man preach, it was like I had a whole jump start in me of, that's what I want to do. 100%. And then he mentioned that he runs a school, Veritas Baptist College. And at this point, Daniel is part of the team now. He's associate pastor. And so him and Zach were there, and I looked at them both. I'm like, I want to go to that school. And then sure enough, you know, I had to tough it out one more year in 2022 with my first college, but then moved to Veritas in 2023. And that transfer was so good, dude. Like, it's helped me so much in my growth as a young preacher. That school, and then the investment between Zach and Dan both. Like, my first sermon, like you just had your first sermon and Isaac had his first sermon. Both were really good for your first sermons. Way better than mine. Mine, I fell flat on my face. 8-minute sermon or something like that, of hardly any content ever, to a point to where afterwards Zach did give a lot of grace, but then he did call me into his office afterwards and was like, "How do you think you did?" I was like, "Not very well."
Now, he tells this often. I don't know if you know that he tells this often.
Cool.
No, the good thing, what you're getting at, because I've heard it several times, where it's, because he uses you as an example where, like, admittedly wasn't the best sermon. Most, I mean, I still think mine wasn't. You're your worst critic, right? And there's still things I'm like, I could have done this better.
Yeah.
But he said, he's like, yeah, I brought him into my office. I asked him how he thought it went, and you told him not great. And he said, okay, what do you want to do about it? And you told him, I want to do it again. I want to try again.
I was like, if I'm going out, I'm not going out like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's for sure.
And that's what he wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Right. You can develop a pastor that way. But if you would have been, because it was kind of a gut check, because, in that instance, I wonder how many preachers are like, man, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Right. If there's that kind of doubt, well, okay, well, let's explore that a little bit, rather than, no, I want another swing at that. Like, let's do it again. Right. That's the ambition. That's the aptitude that you see in Scripture.
Right.
But yeah, he brings it up.
Super cool.
As an example.
No, I gladly accept it, because I bring it up too. It sucked. It was the worst. But he kept investing in me. He kept, when I said I want to do it again, he gave me more opportunity to try again, and to keep trying, and to keep trying, and to keep trying. And then through Veritas, I started taking a sermon prep class on how to prep a sermon, and then a sermon delivery class. And then at that point, when I started taking that class, I had started preaching for maybe a year and a half now.
Sure.
I got a little cocky with it because I was in this class of guys who were just starting out. And I was too, but I had a couple services under my belt. And so we had to like record sermons, send them in, because this is an online school. So I recorded my sermon, and I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was sufficient. And boy, was I wrong. My teacher, phenomenal teacher. I love each of his classes so much. But he wrote me a long note page of what I need to work on in my preaching. And it helped. I mean, it humbled me for sure. It took all that pride and threw it out the window.
Yeah.
But I needed that. I mean, you need that. Anyone who is always telling you that you did good, you're always going to think that you're good.
Well, it doesn't encourage growth.
Right.
And if there's one thing, like, hey, one thing you can't compromise on, one thing that you have to be growing in and get to a spot where you're doing it efficiently and for like the right way, it's preaching. I mean, like there's so much at stake. I mean, like you feel it. I mean, anyone who's called to preach, who's preaching, I mean, it's like you're fostering you're handling people's souls. I mean, you're directing in a way where like I fail to find another example that has that much weight. I mean, there's just not much out there.
There's a lot on it.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a lot more than I thought there was to it. And it only made me love it more.
Yeah.
Anytime I failed, I just wanted to try again. And I still love it. I preached the first week of last month, and I'm itching to do it again.
Yeah,
it's
same.
Something I love doing, and I love trying to do it each time. But was growing in that, and then again to kind of go back to Crystal's family of how close I am. Her sister had gotten engaged a couple years ago, and her sister was hurt a lot. Like I hurt her a lot through this whole engagement thing. But when they sat me down, and I thought we had dinner with them, and I thought it was just going to be a normal dinner. But her and her fiance had asked me if I would officiate their wedding. Funny foreshadowing from way back when, at my high school girlfriend's parents' wedding, where I was like, no, I'm never going to officiate. And then now here I am. And in that moment, I immediately thought of that. And I was like, okay, God, I got it. And so, October of 2025, I officiated my first wedding. And it was really good. Was able to give the gospel. Just continue to try to be the best I can be. And so, that kind of catches us up to now. Crystal's been amazing to me. We're going to be married 5 years this November. And she has just been so good. I have not been the perfect husband by any means. Those first couple of years of being married, I was kind of the worst. I'm not going to lie. I was not the best that I should have been. And she gives me a lot of grace, and she encourages me a lot. And, I know she's quiet, but in public, but, she's my best friend, dude. And she just gives me so much love and care that I don't deserve. And now, just like looking back at my whole life and what I've been through, what I've put myself through, and what, other things I just didn't have control over, and for our listeners who are still listening, I applaud you, because I don't know how, I don't have a watch on me, but it feels like a long time.
You made it. Congratulations.
I made it.
You made it.
You made it. You can get a t-shirt. But I just look back at everything that I've been through, and I realized that, it could have been worse. I've said it before on other episodes, like there are people in this church who have been through far worse things than me. I've just had a long seasons of hurt and dealing with emotions, but God has been with me through every little bit of it, even in stuff that I didn't even see at that time.
No doubt. I've heard this before, so this is my first time hearing this, but much like my testimony or anyone else that we've had on for this segment, God has used the darkest times and turned it into something beautiful.
That's right.
If for nothing else, to lead up to this episode of this recording of this podcast, I have no doubt that people will resonate with your story, your struggles, where you've been and where you're at. So if for nothing else, right, God has used it to let people know, so people can hear that, hey, even on your darkest days, even when you're thinking about ending it, even when it gets as dark as it can possibly get, God is still there. God is still with you. God still loves you. And there's a way out. And it will. It's true, but like it will get better.
Yeah.
Right. And it's from where you were to where you are now, Did you ever think you'd arrive here?
Not a million years.
Yeah.
If you told that 11-year-old introverted boy who comes into this youth group for the first time that he's going to, be a youth leader, he's going to preach in an afternoon service.
Yeah.
That I would have laughed or cried or both. I don't know.
Yeah. It's the growth has been astounding. And I've known you for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I used to pick you guys up from school.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've known you since you were very little.
Yeah.
Being a little bit older than you, but this relationship's been interesting because it's kind of morphed into different things as we've kind of gotten closer, in our adult years, and but I mean, you're inspiring to me, in your growth and your testimony and your perseverance. God's definitely has used you in a powerful way here, and the people in your circle for sure.
Well, it's been a blessing. And last thing I do want to say is, God's done so much. I'm glad I didn't take my life because God has done so much. Like, I still have a great relationship with my dad.
Yeah,
he's not a believer, but I pray for him every day. And he listens to this podcast, and I'm sure he'll hear this, but he knows. I hope he knows how much I love him, and that I do pray for him, and then I hope someday he sees it.
Yeah.
But he's been such a good dad, and my mom, like she's gone through a lot, and she remarried to a godly guy, Christian guy, and so she's plugged into church, and we talk about the Lord in any aspect in our conversations. And then Ben has just been a solid guy this whole time, just been the encouragement of my life. But God has given me more than I deserve, and He's given me a life more abundant. And so everything that happens, like I said I think the last episode, I've had grief without God's people with me, and I've had grief with God's people. Completely different. And I've had more, I'd say the things that I experienced with God's people are harder than I had without. And I'm still fine. Seasons are hard, but they're only seasons.
That's right.
So.
Well, thanks, Nick, for sharing that. I mean, like I said, I've no doubt that'll resonate with our listeners, and it means a lot to. I know what it takes to kind of bear yourself like that, so I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, man.
I'm super curious to see what the timestamp is on this episode.
Pretty long, if I had to guess. Well, let's wrap it up. Tell them where to find us, Nick.
You can find us at Hammer and Quill Publications on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at podcasts@lakeworthbaptist.org. Check out our YouTube channel, the Lake Worth Baptist Church YouTube channel, and the Hammer and Quill YouTube channel. You can find all the content from this ministry, from this church, on those two channels. Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff there. We're kind of revamping some of that too. So, go check it out. Give us a like, follow, and let us know how we're doing. But appreciate everybody for sticking in there, listening to the whole episode, and we will catch you guys next Tuesday with another installment of Thinking Well. Thank you. Bye-bye.